Let's talk about form workflows. Whichever form you click into on Gecko, once it's created and saved for the first time, you'll have a range of different tabs, one of them being the all-important Workflows tab. To create a brand new workflow, simply click Add Workflow, and quite simply you're given the option to tell Gecko what conditions need to arise, what should then happen if those conditions arrive, and when this ought to take place. Very, very straightforward. Now, from the conditions perspective, you'll notice that this currently says there are no conditions set, the actions will still run. You don't need to set a condition. If you want an action to trigger every single time somebody submits your form, just leave the conditions blank and Gecko will action this every single time. You can, however, action a wide range of very form-specific things. The first thing to draw attention to is the field. This will tell Gecko, look at the different values on the form. In this case, we only had 3 fields. But for example, if somebody says that their program of interest contains, let's say, modern languages, German or French, for example, then we can say if they've selected a language-based program, then maybe the action we want to do is to immediately send that student an email or a text message thanking them for their selection and saying here's a bit more information on those particular programs. Gecko supports multiple conditions, so we could say, for example, if the field option is this, or if the email address is not blank, for example, and these can be changed to and or logic. There's no limit to the number of conditions you can add, and there's certainly no limit to the number of actions. We wouldn't need to create, for example, a different workflow to send an email and send a text. They could all be done from exactly the same place. Additional conditions which are unique to forms include things like geolocation, where if the form is being filled in by the student on the web, we're able to track, based on their IP address, which country they're in or which city they're in, which can be used to change who the response is assigned to, which member of your recruitment team ought to be managing this. Other conditions that you can use which are popular include things like captured by. A great example being who is logged into the offline data capture app when this response comes in. So for example, if it's me who's logged in, then I could have a different email that I've personally written sent to the student, whereas if my colleague's logged in at the time that the response is captured, then yeah, the email comes from them instead. We also support assigning to different users based on various criteria, and also which event you've met them at. In terms of the workflow actions themselves, you're able to do things like emailing and texting, which we've already caught on, but also adding to call campaigns, adding them into mass text broadcastings, labeling contacts, adding them into events, assigning them to people, sending webhooks, syncing, choosing it to trigger to a CRM, starting a one-to-one conversation in Gecko Chat, changing consent values. There's a lot at play here, certainly too much for a very short video, but the important thing here is that you understand that there's a lot of different options that are worth you exploring that can definitely speed up your workflows. The final things to point out here is that in addition to triggering immediately when the above conditions are met, you can tell Gecko, rather than immediately, I want this to action on a specific date and time, or rather, perhaps what we'd want to do is action this after a delay. A classic example of this might be if we're using the app at a fair, it's going to be a bit weird if the student immediately gets an email from me and I'm still stood next to them, so it's sometimes better to impart a bit of a delay so things seem a little bit more organic.